Thank you, Mrs. Chair. My Democrat colleague across the aisle, who's 80 years old and has been here over 30 years, just said we're on the verge of a shutdown. She probably just forgot that a few hours ago she voted for the continuing resolution that will extend the budget, and we are not on the verge of a shutdown. So I just wanted to note that for the record.
It may be that the gentlelady doesn't know that there is another body attached to the U.S. Congress called the United States Senate, and they have to vote on the continuing resolution. And when they vote on it, we'll find out what it is that they do with regard to this continuing resolution passed by the House. And by the way, it isn't a law of the land or done until the President of the United States signs it. That may be a basic level, a lesson in civics. There is the House, there is the Senate, and there is the President.
Marjorie Taylor Greene continues to inspire young, unnecessarily confident Americans that you don't have to know anything about how legislation works to be a United States congressperson. But then again, maybe she does actually know how it works, and she's just overly excited that new Speaker Mike Johnson made some deals with Democrats to fund the government for another couple of months.
The House of Representatives has voted to fund the government and avert a shutdown on November 17th. That's just 3 days from now. The so-called continuing resolution would keep some agencies running until January 19th. Others, including the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, would run until February 2nd. It does not include aid to Ukraine or Israel, effectively punting on those vitally important issues.
Maybe one reason that Representative DeLauro schooled Representative Greene on civics is because she knows that the Senate isn't an automatic yes on everything the House passes. And Republican Senator Foghorn Leghorn agrees.
How confident are you that we're going to get this CR finished up today or tomorrow and on to Thanksgiving?
Well, I wouldn't bet my house on it. I'd probably bet your house on it, though. That's one way of saying I think we're not going to have a shutdown, nor should we. We've got a lot to do. And this Congress needs to get up off of its ice cold lazy butt and get it done.
This is where new Speaker Mike Johnson may run into some landmines in the near future. Working with Democrats, passing a continued resolution, and not petulantly demanding that every legislator do what a minority of Republican representatives want is part of the reason that Matt Gaetz said he had McCarthy's ass kicked out. So shouldn't this mean that Speaker Johnson is now on the same hot seat that burned McCarthy?
Johnson released this statement, quote, "The passage of today's continuing resolution puts House Republicans in the best position to fight for conservative policy victories." Joining me right now is Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles, who voted against the spending bill. Congressman, thanks very much for being here this morning. Why did you vote against it?
I was one of the 20 that fought for the rules changes. You have a germaneness issue, meaning that bills have to do with one another. And a continuing resolution and the germaneness issue do not go together. And look, some of the spending levels that were in there continue the Biden administration's woke, legislation and agenda. And so, look, I support the Speaker. He's a friend of mine, but I did not support this bill. And I told him as much.
And not only that, but the House Freedom Caucus released this statement as if they're the only elected officials in government. The House Freedom Caucus opposes the proposed clean continuing resolution as it contains no spending reductions, no border security, and not a single meaningful win for the American people. Republicans must stop negotiating against ourselves over fears of what the Senate may do with the promise, roll over today and we'll fight tomorrow. While we remain committed to working with Speaker Johnson, we need bold change. So now that the House Freedom Caucus has fired off its warning shot to Johnson to get back in line, along with nearly 100 of his fellow Republicans voting against funding the government, the criticism is piling on.
And Mike Johnson, to sit here and think, I need more time. So, okay, Mike, so what you're telling me is that 75 days from now, Mike Johnson's coming back, and it's going to be so hard on the budget cuts, and it's going to be so hard on sealing the border and stopping and defunding everything. Don't even worry about the woke and weaponized. I'm talking about the two central crises we face. So there'll be no Ukraine money. You'll seal the southern border, and you're going to have large cuts to discretionary spending. That's what you're telling me you're going to come back in 75 days and do. Count me as a skeptic right now.
That disgraced former senior counsel to Donald Trump is skeptical, which might mean that unless Johnson reverses course and starts taking legislative advice from people like Steve Bannon, he might be next on the chopping block. because the Republican Party operates on petulant threats and attacks.
Normally you would say, okay, I hear my team, I hear my people on my back. Let me sit down and think about, what are you saying? Hey, Mike, here's what we're saying. Cuts now. Border sealed now. Stick it to them. Get up in Schumer's face, get in Hakeem Jeffries' face, get in Mitch McConnell's face, and particularly get in the Biden regimes and say, no, it stops here. That's leadership. Not to go back and say, okay, I'm going to throw a long ball and you're not going to like it, but you got to give me time. No. Now you're on the clock, brother. Now you're on the clock. And I know you have a biblical worldview, and I'm not trying to be cute or a wise guy in saying this. The book you ought to focus on, the part of the Bible you ought to focus right now is the last part, Revelations, where it is revealed what an apocalypse looks like.